Hello and welcome to India's World. US President-elect Donald Trump had promised to drain the swamp in Washington, D.C. He may not have been able to keep veteran politicians completely out of his cabinet, but his cabinet nominees are certainly turning out to be unexpected, unconventional, and controversial. His incoming cabinet represents a sharp break from the outgoing administration of President Barack Obama. Trump has chosen businessmen with no experience of government, a fair sprinkling of retired military generals, and people with close ties to the world of finance. The question we are asking today is, what might the key foreign policy appointees of Trump mean for the world? To discuss this and the emerging contours of Trump's foreign policy, we have with us a very distinguished panel of experts. We have with us Ambassador Kanwal Sibal, a distinguished diplomat. He was Foreign Secretary of India and has served as India's ambassador to Turkey, Egypt, France, and Russia. We have with us Ambassador Meera Shankar, another distinguished diplomat. She was India's ambassador to the United States. And we're lucky to have with us my old friend Dr. C. Raja Mohan, one of our foremost commentators on foreign policy. He's an academic, journalist, and a foreign policy analyst. Currently, he's the director of Carnegie India, a think tank in New Delhi. I welcome all of you to this discussion. Ambassador Sibal, let me begin with you. Do you think that Donald Trump has deliberately made these provocative appointments to his cabinet? After all, he's nominated a climate change denier as Environment Secretary, a conspiracy theorist in charge of National Security Council, a protectionist has been placed in the Commerce Department, and a recipient of Kremlin's Order of Friendship has been made the Secretary of State.
Well, I think Donald Trump has appointed people who think will translate into policy his present vision of the world. So it's quite obvious he's not going to have a team which doesn't reflect his broad thinking. That's one aspect. The other is that he has also to accommodate in his cabinet diverse lobbies in the United States also, because he cannot totally exclude those people who he thinks were responsible for the swamp in Washington. So there are compromises all politicians have to make. That is the second aspect. The third is how Trump is going to handle his presidency, whether he'll be hands-on or whether he will leave a lot of room to his principal appointees to conduct policy, to shape, form, and conduct policy. Now, if people think that he's not going to be hands-on, he's going to give a lot of room to others, which means, therefore, there could be considerable confusion, because in many ways, these people represent trends which are contradictory and out of tune with what the rest of the world is expecting, and therefore there can be a lot of backlash. He'll have to do a lot of firefighting, even with his allies as well as his adversaries. So it's going to be a challenging task for him to conduct his foreign policy.
Okay. Meera, let's take the case of the Secretary of State nominee, ExxonMobil CEO Rex Tillerson. In 2011, he helped ExxonMobil go into Russia and explore oil in the Russian Arctic in partnership with Rosneft. In 2013, he was given the Kremlin Order of Friendship by Vladimir Putin for his friendship with Russia or business dealings with Russia. Now, do you think that his Russian connections, especially in the wake of the charges being made by US intelligence agencies that Russia interfered in US elections against Hillary Clinton in favor of Trump, will they come in the way of his functioning?
First of all, there will be the question of confirmation, because some of the senior senators like John McCain have raised questions about his links with Russia.
But up to now, hardly anybody, I think there's only one case in recent history where a Secretary of Defense was not confirmed.
The second would be that he's obviously reflecting Trump's own view of how to conduct relations with Russia, because Trump during his campaign praised Putin and also said that in places like Syria, the US should work with Russia against ISIS. So Mr. Tillerson is known as somebody who established a good relationship with President Putin and was able to work the Russian system. He has also criticized the sanctions which were applied on Russia post-Ukraine as being counterproductive. As the CEO of a major energy company, which has operations across the world, he would be fairly familiar with geopolitics and geoeconomics. And Trump, of course, has described him as the person, just the right person, because he knows how to conclude deals across the world and has experience of the world. Of course, he still has shares in ExxonMobil.
Yeah, let me take that question to Raj. As Meera said, he still has huge financial interest in ExxonMobil, about $151 million in company stock. Do you think that the potential benefits to ExxonMobil from US foreign policy could actually lead to conflict of interest once the US lifts, or suppose the US lifts sanctions against Russia, which were imposed after the annexation of Crimea?
Look, I think many of these arguments that these guys are a bunch of, Pauls, they have no expertise, they were not in the government, they have conflict of interest. Where is this criticism coming from? It's largely coming from the Beltway establishment, which feels...
From the swamp.
Yeah, that this guy is an outsider. Why is he bringing outsiders? I think this takes me back, I think there was in China 50 years ago, where there was a debate between red versus expert. The idea that the experts, self-proclaimed guardians of the boundaries of policy making, that point, I think Trump as an outsider is saying, look, there's enough expertise in the system. What you need is those who are in tune with these ideas, and at the political leadership level, that's what you need. Therefore, this idea that, look, the Beltway has the expertise and outsiders don't know anything about running the government, I think he's challenging it. My sense is it's a good thing, because where have these experts taken America in the last 30 years? Into the swamps of Iraq, into the quagmire of Afghanistan. So it's not as if the experts have done greatly well in the last 30 years. So I think it's an opportunity to reinvent American policy. I think how effectively it will be done,
But that you could say about any presidency, because every president brings in new people.
No, but that's the difference, right? I mean, that it's not just new people. There is this rotating, revolving door system. Half the guys are waiting outside to getting in, other half is writing memoirs, trying to sell them outside. So I think he's breaking that system by getting guys who think like him, rather than the established names, which is where the media is attacking him for.
You wanted to say something?
There are certain nuances here. Firstly, even though Tillerson would be the Secretary of State, he is not the interlocutor of Putin. He'll be the interlocutor of Lavrov. So the day-to-day business will be conducted at that level. Second,
what difference would that make?
It makes a lot of difference. Now, Kerry himself, for example, Lavrov has been praising him, was much more constructive in his dialogue with the Russians. But Obama and certain other forces in the United States were deeply anti-Putin. Obama himself had a grudge against Putin, and that sort of didn't work to the advantage of the relationship. Thirdly, energy is not any significant item in the US-Russia relationship, far from it. In fact, the United States is becoming almost energy autonomous. Russia has got huge resources. There is the whole issue of oil prices and what's happening. There's a cutback in production because oil prices are falling. It has other implications in terms of the power base of Russia, this and that. So these are complicated issues. I don't think the fact that he was the chairman of Exxon actually is very material in terms of the energy relationship. But all that really means is that Trump wants to improve relations with Russia. He's a man, Tillerson is a man who got good equation with Putin, and therefore he can help in that process.
We need to take a break at this point. We'll be back with you in a minute. Stay with us. Don't go away. Welcome back. We're discussing the emerging contours of President-elect Donald Trump's foreign policy based on his foreign policy appointments. You wanted to say something before we went on the break.
Yes, just to say that Trump's intent is to try to improve relations with Russia. And that's clear from what he said in the campaign and in his choice of Secretary of State. But is it going to be easy? Because the security establishment has already put him on notice, so to speak, by saying publicly that the Russians hacked the emails of the Democratic Party and the Republican Party and tried to interfere in the US election campaign.
Raj, let's take the case of Peter Navarro, the head of Trump's National Trade Council, nominated head. He authored a book called Death by China, How America Lost Its Manufacturing Base. His nomination has been described in Chinese official press in pretty alarming terms. One of the newspapers had a headline saying, alarm bells ring. What degree of confrontation will the appointment generate in China? And what signal does it send to China?
Look, I think this idea that somehow once he's elected, he'll go back to business as usual, wink, wink, nod, nod, we're back with globalization. I think the appointment of Navarro makes it very clear that there is no going back to the old game. Obama opposes TPP in the campaign, then goes back and supports it. Before that, Bill Clinton opposes NAFTA, then goes in, actually makes sure it is passed. So I think there is a decisive turn in relation to the American policy towards globalization and to international integration. So on this issue, I think it's quite clear that the people who put him across the line in the Rust Belt in the north were those who are against trade. So
do you think he will impose punitive tariffs on China?
No, I think at this point, look, there are a lot of ways in which that can play out. One, you bring in a guy who's wielding a knife. Then the rest of the world is going to say, look guys, put the knife in, maybe we can do a deal. So I think it automatically has created a leverage. Yeah. That doesn't mean, look, he said first day he'll tear up the TPP, second day he'll do something. Yeah. But I think it opens the door for a fresh negotiation, starting with, I think, Canada and Mexico, revise NAFTA. Once he does that, then I think the pressure on China and others is going to be quite intense to be able to amenable to some new terms that the Americans are going to put on the table.
Sibal, do you think that the broader strategic thrust of Trump is to split the informal alliance between Russia and China and instead form a Washington-Moscow axis?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so that he's thinking in those geopolitical terms. I think Russia is not going to be weaned away from China in such a hurry, unless there is such a dramatic improvement of relations with the United States, which is not likely to come about in the foreseeable future. Yes, there may be a reset in the relationship, that's bound to happen. But whether they can align their policy so much that Putin decides once again to turn towards Europe and United States and give up his close strategic partnership with China is unlikely. Number two, the European factor is very important. The Europeans actually today are more anti-Russian in some respects than Trump is or would be. And they are very unhappy with the kind of statements that have come from Trump and the contours of his policy towards Russia. Poland, the Baltic states, Sweden, all these countries actually want stronger US policy towards Russia. And as you know, and the sanctions, the EU sanctions on Russia are not going to be lifted so easily. Number two, it's not as if Trump is going to change his foreign policy to such an extent that the entire global picture will change and Russia would have no more need to actually be with China in the Security Council in terms of combating this regime change policies and everything else, unilateralism, sanctions policy, the strength of the dollar, etc., etc. All these are very complicated issues. So I don't think this is the larger strategic game that he's playing, though I would hope that by weaning Russia away a little bit, he would succeed in putting more pressure on China.
Staying on with China, do you think Donald Trump would continue with his overtures to Taiwan, and also he wants large-scale expansion of the US Navy? Does that signal a more hardline policy in the South China Sea?
It's open to question. Yes, he has reopened the Taiwan issue by taking the phone call from the president of Taiwan. And it's obvious that he's going to use it as leverage, that China perhaps cannot take for granted that the contours of the one China policy, which was accepted by America and which was seen as part of the core parameters within which the relationship was being forged, will continue as it is. So in taking that phone call, Trump has conveyed a signal that when it comes to deal making, he will use whatever levers he has. The second is that you don't see a big kind of grand strategy for foreign policy. but you do see that it will have an emphasis on deal making and perhaps be more transactional, even with regard to allies. So the fact that the allies, because of the alliance with the US, could take certain aspects of their relationship for granted will perhaps be open to question.
One very short thing. Depends on what Trump does with Iran, because that will have an influence on his relationship with Russia.
Okay, so let me ask you on Iran, but indirectly. What would be the impact of the eventual appointment of General James Mattis as Defense Secretary? And what impact will it have on US approach to Iran? Because Mattis in the past has called for a new security architecture in the Middle East, and he has said that Iran is a special case and must be dealt with as a threat to regional stability, nuclear and otherwise.
I think there's a general sense that Mattis is perhaps the most competent in terms of the appointments he has made for the job. He's been chosen as the Defense Secretary. While he's been a strong hardliner on Iran, I think there is he is not supported withdrawing from the nuclear deal. So I think there is a group of people within the coalition he's built today, those who think the threat from ISIS is the paramount one. Therefore, fighting ISIS, and for which you could even do a deal with the Russians, that's important to deal with. But in the process, they know that if you do that, you actually strengthen Iran, right? I mean, if you support Bashar al-Assad and take on ISIS as your main problem at this point. So I think there is that contradiction that, look, is this about fighting ISIS or containing the Iranian power? Finding that balance, I think there will be pulls in different directions within the administration among the people is nominated already.
Okay. We need to take a break again at this point. We'll be back with you in a bit. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're discussing the emerging contours of US President-elect Donald Trump's foreign policy based on the kind of appointments, the nominations he's made for foreign policy jobs. Ambassador Sibal, Trump's choice for CIA director is Congressman Mike Pompeo. Now, Pompeo was opposed to the closing of Guantanamo Bay detention center. He called the CIA people who indulged in torture, he called them heroes. He's called for execution of Edward Snowden and has opposed the Iran nuclear deal. He has also argued that legal and bureaucratic impediments to surveillance should be removed. It should become more widespread, and favors surveillance which includes re-establishing collection of all metadata. What does it mean for the role of CIA in the world? It may mean certain things within the US. But this man who thinks torture is good, who thinks privacy is not important, how would he be as the CIA chief?
See, two things. One is that while you are in an election campaign or when you are not really actually hoping that you're going to get office, you can be very forthright in expressing your views, even if they are totally unconventional and provocative. I don't think that he expected necessarily that Trump would win and he'll be the nominated as director of the CIA. Therefore, once he's there, he would have definitely to change his views on some of these things. That's one. The other is the institutional part. Apart from the CIA as being a huge organization, even if the man at the top thinks along certain lines, doesn't necessarily mean that he can move the entire organization towards what would be extremely controversial concepts that he espouses. But there is also a separation of powers within the system, and there is the oversight by the Congress of the CIA. So he will not have a free hand. Therefore, I won't take it seriously, though, of course, it clearly shows the direction in which the CIA could in certain ways move, which is not very encouraging.
Okay. Meera, Trump's NSA designate Lieutenant General Flynn is a conspiracy theorist and an Islamophobe. He's known to have falsely claimed that Sharia law was spreading across the United States and America was in the midst of a world war with radical Islamists. And he tweeted earlier this year, fear of Muslims is rational in caps. What does it mean for the world to have somebody like Flynn in a job that has in the past has been held by people like Henry Kissinger, Colin Powell, Brzezinski, Sandy Berger, Condi Rice, Susan Rice, all smart, seasoned and strategic thinkers, not Islamophobes, not people who lie?
Well, let's see how he shapes up. He was the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency under Obama and then stepped down because of differences over the fact that he felt that the Obama administration was not being hard enough on Islamic radicalism and Al-Qaeda and so on. Again, I would say he reflects Trump's thinking, because at some level during the campaign, Trump has focused on the threat posed by jihadi Islam to the security of the United States, had said that he is going to prevent Muslims from entering the United States, then changed it to say that he will impose extreme vetting. And now, after the attack in Berlin, there's been a tweet saying, we were right in saying Muslims should not be allowed entry into the US. So I don't think that Flynn, in a sense, is the initiator of this kind of policy. In fact, he reflects Trump's own view of US security, which is threatened more by global terrorism than, by a direct frontal war with any adversary, because the prospect of a war has receded between the great powers, has receded, whereas the main challenge that they face on the homeland is really from terrorism.
So, Bharat, do you think that Trump is trying to reverse US policy on Iran by appointing people who are anti-Iran to these top positions? And how easy or difficult would it be for him to reverse this process? Because it has support amongst the Republicans. And Flynn is particularly known for his hostility towards Iran.
I think the Republicans in general, because they were in opposition in the Congress, tended to oppose the deal. But I think the Iran question will get sorted out within the larger approach they're going to take to the Middle East. Quite clearly, the one view is that, look, US should not get itself into the kind of quagmires that it has in the name of nation building, in the name of modernizing or democratizing Middle East. So that view is quite strong. Second, there is a view which I think Meera was alluding to, that there are people in the administration or in the Republic, among his followers, who think the Judeo-Christian world is in danger, that it is important to bring Putin into the coalition to defeat the Islamic extremism that is threatening the very foundations of Western civilization. So therefore, that view is equally strong. Within that, then the third level is the internal contradictions within the Middle East. Every government in the US or everyone in the world has to deal with those contradictions of Shia-Sunni rivalry, of how do you deal with ISIS without strengthening Iran. So I think not everything is clear at this point, but my sense is the Christian argument, civilization and threat, not getting involved too deeply, gives him an opening that would be different from what has been done so far.
So do you agree with what Raj is saying? Do you think Trump's approach to radical Islamic terrorism would be, he's saying it won't be deep involvement. Would it be more focused and concentrated on counterterrorism alone, or do you think the broad involvement of US in West Asia will continue?
I think the Americans, Trump and others, are hyping up the Islamic threat to the United States. I'm not talking about the Islamic threat to the region in which these forces have emerged, or India. But United States is relatively better protected, and it doesn't have the same kind of problems that Europe has in terms of large Muslim population, radicalized, almost contiguous borders, at least through Turkey and across the Mediterranean, and the whole colonial past, which bears upon the relationship today, and their policies of intervention in the Middle East. So they are better protected. Why they are hyping it up so much is difficult to...
No, my question is, will it be a more focused approach, or will it be a generalized presence?
One aspect of this could well be Israel's role, because United States system is penetrated by the Israelis a great deal, and Israel naturally has this phobia. Although again, it's very murky, because Islamic State and all these forces are not targeting Israel, and Israel has connections with Saudi Arabia and Qatar. So it's a very complicated issue. So I don't think that and finally, I say, how many fires is Trump going to light up with China, with Iran, with Europe pertaining to Russia, with the Middle East? with Latin America. How many fires are you going to light
Okay,
up?
we've really run out of time. So
I think
quickly.
it's not so simple, because on the one hand, Trump has been quite hard on Iran. On the other hand, he's been equally hard on Saudi Arabia. And if you take someone like Michael Flynn, he's been quite hard on Pakistan, basically saying that, either Pakistan has to deliver on taking action against the groups which are like the Haqqanis or the LET, which are on Pakistani soil, operating from Pakistani soil, or then the US will have to look at other options.
Yeah, it's exactly what we've been saying for a long time, but we've run out of time. So I'd like to thank Dr. C. Raja Mohan, Ambassador Meera Shankar, Ambassador Kanwal Sibal for participating in this discussion. That is all we have for you today. We'll be back again as usual next week. Until then, goodbye, and thanks for watching India's World.